And we're back, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Saturday evening here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. You'll see I'm wearing one of my 3 Ali shirts. This is not an Ali anniversary or reminiscence, but this is a boxing-themed episode, which I know I'm a movie guy. You can tell by The Office here, but the boxing episodes are the most fun to record, as the memories of a famous fight night come rushing back, or in some cases, of a fight that I only read about and then watched later on. But today, November 9th, marks the 28th anniversary since the fight that was billed, Holyfield-Tyson, finally. And the reason why it was promoted in that fashion is because the guys were supposed to fight in 1990 and then 1991, and neither of those happened for, well, the first reason being that Buster Douglas defeated Tyson, and the second reason being that Mike Tyson had some legal troubles, very significant legal troubles. So the two guys who had been on a collision course, and there's even that famous bit that many of you remember from the Tyson-Douglas fight, where I think they're about 3 or 4 rounds in, and they talk about how Evander was about to sign, or he had signed, guaranteed big money to face Tyson, and that money is not in the bank because Buster Douglas was surprising the entire world at that moment, and then he ended up actually winning the fight. So in order to understand why, because at the time, this fight was thought to be an easy fight for Tyson. Holyfield, the consensus was that he was washed up. Not that he was past his prime. That was understood. It was understood that Tyson was not the same dominant force that he had been circa 1988, the Spinks fight. But Holyfield was considered to be completely washed up. The 3 fights with Bo took an awful lot out of him, which they did. But he didn't look good in the fight against Bobby Ches. He just didn't look good. Yeah, he won the fight, but Bobby Ches was fighting way above his, not really his pay grade, but he was fighting above his weight class. And Ches was also past his prime. So it didn't put Evander in a good position. But the thing that people seem to, well, now it's obvious, but back then it wasn't. There was an idea. Tyson still only had the 1 loss on his record. And his comeback, the 3 fights, had been very, very easy. You had the Buster Mash, he had 4. You had the Peter McNeely, that was ridiculous. Bruce Seldon, who I don't think that he really wanted to be out there. Buster Mathis Jr. One of the great quotes, Ferdy Pacheco said, I think it was Buster Mathis Jr., said he made it to the 3rd round with a life raft, meaning all he was doing was just holding on for dear life for 3 rounds. And a Frank Bruno fight, Bruno was psyched out before the fight started. Even though he had given Tyson some tough moments in the first fight that they had, he was really I want to say he was the first guy that really shook Tyson up that we saw. He landed a couple of big shots. Bruno's big dude. Talk about genetics. My God, that guy had crazy genetics. But the matchup for him was wrong as far as Tyson. I don't think he could have ever beaten him no matter what. It would have been maybe 1 in 100, probably not even. So Tyson still had the mythology. Not that the Buster Douglas fight was considered, that didn't really. No, it happened. It happened. Buster was an extraordinary talent who hadn't really put it together, despite his successes. But on that night, he showed the fighter that he could have been from the start. Big guy, good movement for such a big guy. Perfect, hands up, the jab, like from a technical standpoint, from a craftsmanship standpoint, you look at Buster Douglas, this guy does everything right. That's how you do it. That's how you stand. That's how you take on a swarmer, a great swarmer, as far as Tyson. So he only had the 1 loss, and Holyfield was thought to be washed up. And people knew enough of Evander. I got to tell you, I don't think Michael Moorer beat him, to be honest with you. But if Moorer had not gotten that decision in 94, Evander had the issue with the heart. And then, we wouldn't have gotten a George Foreman title shot. So I guess you could say history is grateful that Evander lost that very disputed decision to Michael Moorer. But it just seemed that he didn't really have a chance. But as Bobby Chez and Ferdy Pacheco and Steve Albert all said on the it was the Showtime pay-per-view broadcast. Bob Sheridan, who I'm going to talk about, he did the international broadcast of this fight. But those three guys all said they didn't think Evander had a chance to win, but they said, he's going to come to fight. There is nothing in Evander Holyfield's career that says he's coming out here knowing he's going to lose. He's not going to roll over for Tyson. He's not going to be scared of a guy that he'd known since they were in the juniors. He's going to take his shot. He's going to shoot his bolt. But as Chez pointed out, he's going to have to tie him up. He's going to have to try to steer clear of Mike's big shots. That's good advice, but who can do it, really? Historically, this is not an upset. And maybe I'm going to say some controversial things now, just related to boxing, not related to the world. But it was considered an enormous upset because the mythology of Tyson and Evander seemingly washed up. But looking back on it, this was not an upset. Evander Holyfield was a greater fighter. It's amazing. He already was a world heavyweight champion. He beat Riddick Bowe. And he fought him to a standstill the first time, lost the decision. That was a fair decision. And the third fight, he just kind of ran out of gas. It was one of the few times that Holyfield of that era didn't have the endless motor. But Riddick Bowe, for a guy who also looked like he was out of shape all the time, he had an incredible motor. We saw even in the Galata fights where he'd be on the receiving end and he should have been out of gas and he really wasn't. Riddick was a bit of a unicorn himself. This was not an upset. Near prime Mike Tyson versus near prime Holyfield. I believe that Evander Holyfield beats Mike Tyson more than half the time. He's not as flashy and exciting of a fighter, and he didn't have the unbelievable skill set of Mike Tyson. But I believe that Evander made more of his prodigious talent, and Evander he had something else. He had that quality that only the real great ones had. And we can argue Tyson's place in history. You want to talk about natural talent? He's got to be in the top 5, maybe the top 3. Off the top of my head, who are the most talented guys in terms of range of skill sets? You want to say Ali, Tyson, and Jones? Roy Jones Jr., that is? I mean, most people would put Ali in that category. He was a guy who had a whole bunch of different things he could do. He could dance around the ring. He could just try to tie up his opponent and blast away. He could throw right-hand leads like he tried to do against Foreman. I'm just going to knock this guy out early. No one's going to expect it. Tyson's talent was off the charts. Took a great shot, huge power in both hands, incredible speed. And he was a good defensive fighter. All of those components, incredible. But Tyson didn't do that well in the deep water fights. And Evander was somebody who really did. And even in the fight with Foreman in 91, he wanted going away. I have that as a 10-2 fight. George was in there. George was tough. And Evander was able to keep distance. And when George was able to land, he was able to tie him up. But that was a deep water fight. And Evander was still standing at the end. And this fight, Tyson-Holyfield finally, was a deep water fight. Both guys had their moments. Like this had the makings of Ali Frazier, of Wilder Fury, of Bo Holyfield. Tyson was in terrific condition. But when I say that I believe that Holyfield was better, you just look at the way he absorbed some of Mike's best shots. And that's something that surprised Albert and Ferdy and Bobby Chez. Now, Bobby Chez was an unabashed fan of Tyson. He and Tyson, luckily for Bobby, they never got in the ring together. But Bobby, while he was calling this fight, was clearly talking and remembering, I gave Evander all he could handle. He's got no business. He can't beat Tyson. I wouldn't even last a minute with Tyson. He didn't say that, but this is what he had to have been thinking. But Mike, at various points in this fight, and people in the audience at the Grand, a lot of them, I think, didn't expect Evander to win. But the excitement in the crowd suggested that the audience was expecting a terrific fight. They didn't think that Holyfield was going to get KO'd in the first round. They thought they were going to see something. Just as 6 and a half years prior, we just wanted to see a competitive fight with Buster Douglas because Mike had so many easy defenses. You love the sport of boxing. You want to see a fight. You don't want to see nothing, only cakewalks. The 93-second demolition of Spinks will always stand as the finest representation of Tyson at what we think was his physical peak, his best showing. Not his best fight, but his best showing. Just like Ali versus Cleveland Williams. That wasn't his best fight, but it was the best representation of what he was capable of at his physical peak. Tyson Spinks. But on this night, Evander surprised a lot of people. I think he won the first round. And Mike right away came out the gate and landed a couple of shots. He landed the shot that floored Mike Spinks in '88 or something very similar, the first knockdown, where Spinks kind of got hit on the side, took another shot, and took a knee. Nothing wrong with taking a knee. It's better to do that than the fight's over and you're in your dressing room wondering what happened. But Evander was not hurt. He got hit. He seemed to lose his balance. He went into the ropes. And Bobby Ches, if you listen to his commentary, as soon as he hit him, he got his attention. Looks like Mike's going to take his time. Now, Mike was rushing a little bit. He was trying to square Evander up with a home run bomb. And towards the end of that round, Freddie Pacheco pointed that out. Mike's trying too hard to land a home run bomb. He needs to settle down into regular fight mode. But I believe Evander won that round. And as much as it's a cliche to say, I believe he got Mike's respect, I think he did. Because, yeah, the guys knew each other in juniors, and there's an amazing picture of them circa 1986 clowning around at what I assume was Customato's gym. Mike was already on his way to winning the championship, and Evander was on his way to greatness too. And the guys look good together. They look like if they hadn't been on a collision course that they would have been best pals. That's how they looked when they were so young. But Mike knew from that first round, I believe, this guy's not done. Whoever said this guy's done, they don't know what they're talking about. If he was done, he would have folded up on some of those shots I landed. I'm not even sure I shook him up. So as the fight unfolded, Evander, I believe, won 3 of the first 4 rounds. Not everybody would necessarily agree. And the other call, the Colonel Bob Sheridan call, he also, and Colonel Bob goes all the way back, he did the main call of Ali Foreman in Zaire. That's how far back he goes. And he was doing commentary back into the 60s. Bob Sheridan is somebody who was a very astute observer. And the last great fight that he called was Floyd Mayweather versus Oscar De La Hoya in, May of 2007. That was another incredible promotion. Instead of Tyson Holyfield, finally, that was Mayweather versus De La Hoya. The world awaits. The world awaits. I think that held the record for biggest pay-per-view buys at that point in time. Not 100% on that. But Bob Sheridan, in that fight, his commentary is so good because he explains Oscar's not going to win a decision. He doesn't have to say Oscar's not going to win it, but he comes at, he's like, there's too many rounds that I know Floyd is going to get, and there are too many toss-up rounds. Oscar's not going to win them all. He can't win this decision. He was saying, you're going to have to knock him out. Good luck. That was one of those, Ernie Shavers could win the fight with Ali. He's got to knock him out in the 15th. Go right ahead. Good luck. Antonio Tarver versus Bernard Hopkins. That was another one of Larry Merchant's great moments. Like, it looks like Tarver needs a knockout. Yeah, good luck. Good luck with Bernard Hopkins. But in the 5th round of this fight, and the 5th and 6th rounds, as it turned out, were the pivotal rounds in the first fight between Tyson and Holyfield. The crowd started to pick up the excitement in the 2nd round when Evander landed a shot, and Mike, he didn't exactly stumble back to the ropes, but he looked like a fighter who had gotten hit and wasn't 100% sure. Am I supposed to hold on? Am I supposed to cover up? What do I do? Mike didn't get hit that much. He didn't have to answer those questions. This was the first time in his comeback that he had to even ponder, now what? So the fans started to get excited in the second round. We're going to see a real heavyweight fight. And Bobby Chez in the second round said, Tyson is being fought tonight. And he said it in a way that indicated he was excited. He still thought Mike was going to win, but they were seeing a heavyweight championship fight between two champions, which was what Pacheco said after Bobby made that comment. So in the fifth round, Evander is keeping distance. And the thing with Evander, he was a great boxer, but we know he could hit. He wasn't afraid to brawl. And he was an action fighter. He didn't fight dull fights. You can't find any dull fights in his resume until the first fight with Lennox Lewis, which I got to be honest, that was really a boring fight. That was a dull fight. But in the fifth round, there is a moment that Mike, who still had his energy, and he still looked like a guy who thought he was going to win a fight. Mike is moving, he's bobbing and weaving, and Evander maybe seems to be slowing just a little bit. And Mike lands that sweet combo that he did as well as anyone who ever did this for a living. He lands the hook to the body and the uppercut. Now that was the combination that ended how many fights? That separated how many legitimate contenders from Bruno on down from their senses, whether it was Larry Holmes. Mike landed that. It just was so textbook the way he did it. So that's another thing with Tyson. He did everything right mechanically. He made wild swings. But as far as just from the boxing 101, you can't hook or uppercut cleaner than Tyson. So he landed that magnificent up, down, under, hook to the body, uppercut. It's so perfect because when a fighter gets hit, you go to cover, and here comes Mike with the uppercut. He landed the combo on Evander. And now Mike didn't do the George Foreman in Zaire where George landed a right to the body that Ali's supposed to go down and the fight's probably supposed to be over. And George almost seemed to back up, waiting for him to drop. And then has the moment of, why isn't he going down? Tyson didn't stop, but he landed this combination. And Evander nodded at him and gave him a look as if to say, that's right. You hit me. I'm still here. Let's fucking go. That was a moment that I thought Evander was going to win the fight because he took Mike's best. You can't do it better than that. He absorbed those hellacious shots. There are other fighters that would have dropped just from the body punch, let alone that incredible uppercut. Hell, think about Mike at the end of the eighth round against Buster when he's getting the shit beat out of him. It was almost a 10-8 round, and Mike was already having trouble seeing, was exhausted from swinging and missing and from the pounding that he had gotten in that round. Lands that uppercut, almost wins the fight. Evander survived that round. And he survived that round looking pretty good, but Mike clearly won that round. And then Mike seemed to almost take a little bit of control in round 6. Evander still had the bounce in his legs, but he wasn't quite as sharp as he had been earlier in the fight. And you could say that kind of combination is a big part of the reason. Because we've seen fighters where the legs don't move as well after you take those hellacious shots to the body. And you don't recover 100% when you absorb an uppercut like Mike delivered there. So Evander started to slow down. But then with about 30 seconds left in the round, he seemed to gather himself again, and he started to bounce a little bit better. And Chez, again, I guarantee you was rooting for Mike. But Chez said something so beautiful, didn't realize how right he was going to be. He said, Evander is closing this round like a champion, like the overachieving warrior that he is. And just as he said that, Evander landed that punch that knocked Tyson down. Now, it was similar, speaking of Ali, when Ali fought Wepner in 75 in the fight that inspired Rocky. If you're in the arena and all you see is Chuck Wepner load up and Muhammad Ali go flying, holy shit! New champion. Because you don't know where the punch landed. All you know is that Ali, a guy who was almost impossible to move off his spot, went flying. Well, in that case, Chuck stepped on his foot. And, the joke is he kind of put his hand out and Ali went down. It's called a knockdown, though, because technically he made contact, he went down. Well, in Tyson Holyfield, as much as the people in attendance who couldn't see a punch, they just saw Mike go down. It was only the second time in Mike's career he went down. The first time being Buster in Japan in January of 1990. Mike goes down. MGM Grand Bedlam. Gets right back up. Mitch Halpern comes over. Are you okay? Yeah, he's fine. And then we realize it was a balance shot. Mike had stepped a little bit wrong, and Evander caught him with a shot. It wasn't really even a body punch. He kind of caught him almost under the pec. And as the announcer said, it was a balance shot. But that's a 10-8 round. In almost all cases, the judges, even if they say, well, it was a balance shot, it's still a knockdown. And I think, if memory serves, all three judges did call it a 10-8 round. Now, I want to point one thing out before I forget. And Ferdy Pacheco made light of this during the fight, and it came up. After the sixth round, I think it was, where they started to really get the idea, Mike could still win, but Evander's winning this fight. And he doesn't look like he's just going to fold up here. It looks like the energy, that both guys are tired, but both guys still have the good bounce in their legs. So I think it was Ferdy who said, all of the boxing experts, the boxing columnists across the country, and ESPN and Sports Illustrated, whatever it is, he said only one guy picked Evander to win the fight, Ron Borges of the Boston Globe. I think that was Steve Albert who said that. And then Ferdy Pacheco said, yeah, Ron's sitting right over here. He's looking at us laughing. Thought that was kind of funny that they even brought that up. But honestly, after that knockdown, Tyson still landed shots. Mike was out there to win. But it emboldened Evander. And whatever bounce in his legs that seemed to not quite be there in the fifth and sixth was back. And I don't know that Tyson won any rounds after the sixth. It's arguable. There were a couple, you could say the seventh and eighth were close. But Evander was fighting the fight like a guy who knew he was going to win. Mike was still swarming, but Evander wasn't fighting backwards. He was not circling and doing what they thought he was going to have to do to try to win. As they mentioned, Evander, when Mike gets close, he's going to have to tie him up. And the slugfest is not Evander's fight. Fighting inside against somebody who could hit like Mike Tyson wasn't his fight. But there was a moment, and this, I'm not sure which round, where Ches says, they're trading shots. It's not Evander's fight, but he's winning. And then Pacheco again says, I'm not so sure it isn't his fight because he's been doing this all night. He's still standing there and he's getting the better of these exchanges. History tells us that Evander dominated the ninth round and then towards the end of the 10th round. And this shows the toughness of Mike Tyson. Let it be said that Mike Tyson took a hell of a shot. Think about the bombs that Buster Douglas, I know Buster Douglas wasn't a big hitter. Come on. Buster was a 230-pound guy whose technique was impeccable. Don't tell me he couldn't hit. Yeah, he didn't hit like Ernie Shavers. He didn't hit like Lennox Lewis. He didn't hit like Mike Tyson or the Klitschkos. But Buster knew how to punch. And Buster landed a lot of big right hands in that night, and Mike walked through a lot of them. And Buster's uppercut would have knocked a lot of fighters unconscious, the uppercut that ended the fight. So Mike, in round 10, was starting to get a little reckless because he was exhausted and he was losing the fight. He knew he was behind. But Mike Tyson was not going to just let his crown go. He wasn't just going to let the fight be lost on a decision. He's going to shoot his bolt. So he got a little reckless with his form, and as he attempted to throw a big right hand, Evander snapped one in there. And this is the same punch that ended the Buster Douglas fight. It was a big right hand. In the Buster fight, I'm not sure if it was a right hand lead, but in this case, Evander landed the shot before Tyson could get the punch off clean. That's a shot that stopped Buster Douglas, who still had all of his energy. It was the third round, and really not that much had happened in the first 2 rounds. Tyson got smashed by this perfect shot, staggered back to the ropes, and Mitch Halpern, unfortunately, did not meet a very good end. But Mitch Halpern was a great ref. He took a lot of heat because of the Ruelas-Garcia fight in which Garcia died. But Mitch Halpern was a terrific ref. And you watch the way Mitch Halpern monitors the action. After Tyson gets hit, staggers back to the ropes. And you can find this on YouTube, the Bob Sheridan call, it's so good. Again, Sheridan is carrying on and screaming, Mike is going to get knocked out. Mike is going to be stopped. Halpern is watching, and he doesn't stop the fight because Evander didn't land cleanly with Mike on the ropes, and Mike still had his hands up. The bell rings, Halpern jumps in, sends the fighters back to their corners, and you think about it, the fight as a competitive contest seemed to be over. Ches says, Evander's got to be careful because you know Mike's going to have that natural power. But they came out for the 11th round, and the sense was Mike's not going to survive this round. Even though his corner said, Mike, you need this round big. How? Evander, as exhausted as he should have been, Evander was throwing combinations at the end of round 10 like it was the first round. He did not look like a fighter who was struggling to keep his hands up or keep the spring in his step. He looked like a guy who could have fought another 5 rounds. Easy. So history tells us that in the 11th round, Evander landed a couple of shots, keeping distance. He was being cautious, not reckless. He wouldn't be Evander if he was ever reckless. He was being cautious, and he landed a couple of shots and got Mike on the ropes again, and Halpern had to stop the fight. There was too much time left in the round. There wasn't any reason to let it continue. We didn't need Mike stretched out on the canvas with his mat. No. It was a great stoppage by Mitch that night. And bedlam in the MGM Grand. And I don't necessarily know that the entire crowd, forgetting people who bet on the fight, I don't know that the entire crowd was necessarily pro-Evander, but they saw a great heavyweight championship fight between 2 all-timers. And no, Evander was not washed up. He was past his prime. So was Mike, but they were both young in terms of normal person years. They were a little bit older as far as boxing, but the guys were tremendous. The conditioning, they're bombing away, they're winging in the 10th round, into the 11th round. It is a great fight. And that's how I felt when it was over. Yes, I was rooting for Evander. I'm somebody who became a Tyson fan later. I'm a fan of his from the historical perspective, but while he was up there, I just wanted him to have competitive fights. I didn't like the fact that the heavyweight division had seemingly gone slack. Not that there weren't terrific fighters. This is also a cliche. The guys of the 70s, the Ron Lyles and Jimmy Youngs, the guys that never actually gained a piece of a heavyweight championship. Larry Holmes also said it. The fact that I was still competitive into the 90s, they don't teach them the same way as they did when I was coming up through the ranks. It's got to be. But this was a great fight and not an upset. It's like when young Cassius Clay was 30-1 to beat Sonny Liston, despite the fact that he was undefeated. Well, Henry Cooper almost knocked him out of the ring, and he was Olympic champion. That was considered a massive upset, but historically, it was not an upset. That was the outcome that would be expected from a 22-year-old Cassius Clay, soon to be Muhammad Ali, against an aging Sonny Liston. Well, of course the kid beat him. Of course he humiliated him in the return fight. History sometimes shifts perception. And the perception of this fight at the time is not the perception now. And it is very unfortunate that Tyson lost his cool and lost his head and went to the biting Evander's ears in 97. I know the guys have made up and they've had a lot of laughs, and they've even teased the idea of having another fight. No. No matter what happens with Mike Tyson and Jake Paul, we don't want Evander out there again. We saw what happened with Vitor Belfort. No, don't let him fight again. It's not necessary. But on this day, 1996, in something that was a huge surprise at that time, we got a great heavyweight title fight between certainly two of the 10 best heavyweights who ever lived. And there are those that would put Evander as a top 10 greatest fighters who ever lived. Professionals, that is. Remember, he started as a cruiser. You're not supposed to be able to do what he did, to, in some cases, more than hold his own and dominate much bigger heavyweights. Evander, all-time end boss, badass. And Mike Tyson, the extraordinary talent, who even though he came up short on November 9th, he was out there to win. He just ran into a buzzsaw, a guy who had a lot more left in the tank than anyone knew at the time. Tyson Holyfield finally, on this day, 1996. This has been episode 353 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Saturday evening with me here in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then,